Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Kate Dudzik. Let me tell you a little bit about Kate. Her passion is consciousness and exploring the nature of thoughts, AI. Has been a challenging and rewarding avenue for Kate to explore these themes in meaningful and applied ways. She loves working with all things thought related, including expertise and mental health, solution driven and design related, including agent based models, cognitive models, and system analysis. Her experience has enabled her to specialize in areas of AI, expertise, cognitive science, and neuroscience. So, Kate, how are you? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me again today, Will. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
So a bit about myself. Oh my goodness. First of all, I'm doing well. It is the first snowfall of the year here in Toronto, and I couldn't be
Oh, okay.
happier. It is beautiful. Is it snowing where you are yet?
No, not yet. It's mid 40s at the time of this recording, mid to upper
Okay.
40s. Yeah.
Okay. So it's still good running weather.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm a cognitive scientist, which means I have spent many years, I have 2 degrees in the science of essentially human thinking. So my expertise is human thought structures, what makes us think the way that we do, and how can we predict and look at, then analyze human thoughts. So what does that even mean? I've spent a lot of time replicating human thought patterns and behaviors using computers. So in like artificial intelligence, studies where we predict the types of mistakes people will make, looking to use that to improve training systems, so on and so forth. But I mean, for the purposes of our discussion today, not only am I a cognitive scientist, but I'm also a human being, which
Right.
is a little bit funny when you start looking at the ups and downs of our decisions in dating and what that means for us.
Talking about that, it's just getting to know the human side of someone else because I think at the end of the day, I guess we're not who we are the first maybe 20, 30 days of dating someone. We want to be the ideal man or the ideal woman for that other person. And then I hate to say it, then do our true colors come back out
Ooh.
after 60 days, 75 days, 31
Ah,
days?
that's a beautiful, beautiful question. And it's very complicated. So, first and foremost, just putting it out there, humans make bad decisions in dating. It doesn't
Mm,
matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how educated you are. It doesn't matter where you come from, if your parents were together, all that jazz. It is in our nature to make poor decisions in dating because it involves a lot of things outside of our logic center. So you're not necessarily making the most rational decisions possible at the front of a relationship. So when we're choosing
mm,
a mate, when we're deciding to go work up the courage to ask that human out, and it can lead us down some paths that we end up playing a lot of games with ourselves to justify and rationalize. So when it comes to presenting ourselves, and we talked a bit about this on the last episode where we discussed
yeah.
online dating and representation of the self, but I don't think it needs to be the case that your true colors, quote unquote, come out after 30, 60 days. And I think if that is the case for you, that it's important to take a step back and start to ask yourself if you know yourself. Because true intimacy, and this has been defined in a lot of happiness studies and a lot of relationship studies on successful marriages or monogamous partnerships or even polyamorous partnerships, is
Mm,
honesty, transparency, and openness. So I
mm,
don't know about you, but when I started to realize that presenting my true self at the first onset, like in the first meetings, it kind of empowered me because it made me realize, oh my gosh, I don't need to hide what I'm working on or the flaws about myself that I want to grow to change or the mistakes I've made in the past from these people. They still like me, even in spite of these things, which is
right.
crazy because I have a voice in my head, like a lot of people, where I sit in self criticism, especially when I look back at some of the people I've dated before. And I'm like, oh my God, I made that horrible effing decision. What's wrong with me? Am I a good scientist? Like, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And I used that as ammunition against myself to be like, well, maybe other people won't like this. And so I
Mm.
guess what we'll talk about today is kind of going through that process with yourself
Right.
to start getting to a place where you can say, okay, I'm okay with my authentic self. And if this person isn't compatible with who I am, where I am, and where I want to be, then that's okay. It just means we're
Mm.
not good for each other, and that's okay too. Or maybe we are better off as platonic friends to have that type of relationship, which is just as important as a romantic relationship, to have bonds with people that are not involving love, romance, and sexuality. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Because I think you hit it right on the head when it comes to relationships, especially, I think a lot of people take things to heart when
Mm-hmm. Of course.
you break up with someone and then you realize, like I've done that where I'm like, my God, the red flags were there at the beginning, and I just
Yes.
I
Yep.
let it go because would it be did another body part of mine,
Yeah.
I think you know where I'm going
Yeah.
with this,
Of course. Yeah, you're
was
human.
yeah, was I thinking sexually or was I thinking emotionally
Yep.
with this person? And like I said,
Yes.
the red flags were there, and I just kept on ignoring it. When I realized, then when I started just backing off little by little,
Yeah.
I did think about it. But since our topic today is being empowered after a breakup,
Mm-hmm.
um, I felt empowered because you know what? I said to myself, I did hear what she said, but I didn't
Yeah.
listen.
Ah,
It just
that
went
is great. Yep. You
right.
heard. Yep.
Yes. So I listened. I heard what she said.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I heard all the red flags.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, Kate, I just let it go. For some reason, I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't listen to it. And then after the breakup, then
Mm-hmm.
I sat down one day and I'm like, holy shit, this was
Yeah.
all the red flags were there, and I just
Yeah.
ignored it. So if that comes to play, or when that does come to play, whether it's after a breakup or during the honeymoon phase,
Mm-hmm.
do we sit down with our partner and talk to them and say, hey, this is what I noticed about you? Or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, is that something that you could talk to somebody about? Or how do you navigate through that maze?
Yeah. So that's a really great question and a good point. So I do have kind of like three main pillars to approach in those situations. And first and
Okay.
foremost, pheromones and hormones going off inside your body are
Mm,
a powerful influence on you. And it can be
mm,
really hard if you do choose to have sexual relationships with somebody to think logically while you've got all that stuff going on inside your brain and in your body. Like it's part of being a human being,
right.
unfortunately and
Yeah.
fortunately, better and worse there. But
Right.
one of the first things that I like to kind of think about in this situation, and you brought up kind of discussing with this person and saying things I noticed about you. And I think that's a great kind of place to start because it's not an attack,
Mm,
right? There's nothing inherently wrong, quote unquote, with how someone chooses to be because that's how they are authentically in that
right.
moment or in this place and time. And one of the things I have an issue with in these types of situations is it's like saying that person's a smoker. Okay.
Mm.
To anyone who's ever smoked and quit smoking before, this one's for you. People often go, oh, yeah, that person over there, they're a smoker. Yeah, they're a smoker. Like it's some sort of permanent identity piece that you're going to hang on to forever, whether you want to or not. You're just that now. You're defined by this thing that you may currently do. And I think it's very unfair because there's a lot of people who have smoked in their lives, whatever the substance, and then decided they don't want to do that anymore. Boom, all of a sudden, poof, they're not a smoker anymore. Oh my
Right.
goodness, where did it go? It was a part of their permanent identity. And I think it's such a funny way to describe people. Like, it's like,
Mm,
oh, that person identifies as female. I'm going to call them a woman, and that person smokes a cigarette, I'm going to call them a smoker. And like, as someone who doesn't smoke, but who has smoked in the past,
right.
I'm a non smoker, but I have
Mm,
once been called a smoker. And I think it's the
gotcha.
same here. So we're looking at people and our relationships with them. And it's like this thing I notice about you. And it's a partnership in this place. And especially when you first start dating, you think that the first kind of part is looking at the timeline. So who was I before I met this person? who was I in the relationship? And then who am I afterwards? And
Mm,
so you can kind of flip this again to bring in your point there, where it's just like, so who is this person before me? Who were they when we were together? And then who are they afterwards? So, I mean, to give you an example of this, I was in a relationship with somebody who was very much a narcissist. They could not, for the life of them, admit that they had done something wrong. Literally, in the entire time that I dated them, and I'm not even joking, and I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not,
mhm,
they couldn't admit to being the problem. It was always
mm,
because of somebody else, or because of life, or because of circumstance. And they live in that victim mindset. And what's so absolutely captivating about this is because they believe it so much, it's very hard not to believe it too, right? Like when it's someone's authentic truth, it's very hard to say, oh yeah, so I kind of fell into that narrative where I went along with it, and I was like, okay, sure, I can see it your way, I can see it this way or that way. And as you can imagine, this involved a lot of gaslighting, where this person
mm,
would then manipulate what I knew to be true and say, no, you're crazy, you're wrong, that's not the case, and then flipping reality and shaping it the way that they needed me to see it. So when I came out of this relationship, the first thing I did was reflect on, who was I before this person? I was honest. I was working on myself. I had some trust issues, but I had a lot
mm,
of intimate, close relationships with friends where we talked about it. We had bonding. I had a great therapist where I had a healthy relationship with them. And then I looked at who
mm,
I was in that relationship, where I became isolated from my people. This person told me to stop seeing my therapist because they didn't like them, not to talk to certain people that I liked. They became increasingly abusive. They became increasingly controlling, using suicide as a method to indicate whether or not I was allowed to leave the house. And all of these things started to build and build and build. And then after I broke up with them, I started recognizing that I was falling back into who I was before the relationship.
mm.
And so instead of looking at this as a kind of, oh my God, this person did it to me, I had to come to terms with the fact that this person was like this before they met me. This
Right.
person was like this when we were together. And they're probably still like that now. And that's just them. And that's okay. Maybe they've changed, maybe they hadn't, but I wasn't looking at it from a longevity perspective because I was the one who changed in the relationship, not
Right.
them. It was things I didn't want to
Oh,
see, like you were talking about. And I think it kind of gave me some strength as well because I started to realize that, at the end of the day, you gotta own up to the fact that you choose to be with somebody every single day. And
yeah.
unlike this person that I'm describing, I owed it to myself to take accountability for my own mistakes and my
Right.
own decisions to be there, not take on a victim mindset because, well, that person was just being that person and that's how they want to go through life. And I may not agree with it, but you know what? I will no longer be hurt by it. So, you got to
Right.
learn when to accept that you made the decision. So, kind of taking accountability for that, it led me down to the second place where it's like, okay, I need to reflect.
Mm,
So it's us and them. You got to get real about what actually attracted you to this person in the first place.
mm,
And why did you decide to be with them at all? We talked a little bit about sexual chemistry or attraction. So if you are a sexual person, you'll understand that sometimes there's people in this world when you're single and available, and you're just like, well, yeah, you know what? We could spend a night or two together. I wouldn't complain about that. That's quite powerful. That can be one of the reasons why you're attracted to them. But we can also get a little bit deeper where we look at unresolved issues in ourselves,
mm.
self esteem issues, body issues, intimacy related issues, attachment problems. Fear of being alone is a really big one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it leads to toxic behaviors of themselves going, oh, my partner does this wrong or that wrong or this wrong or that wrong. It's like, well, sweetie, you didn't choose them for their ability to do the thing that you're complaining they don't do. Like,
Right. Right. Right.
and you kind of got to look at yourself and say, why did I pick this person? And what do I want in a spouse? So it kind of, I know this sounds like a lot of heavy lifting, and maybe it sounds like a really heavy discussion here. But in truth, it's a really cool exercise because you actually get to know yourself in a way that you don't normally have access to. We're
Mm,
so captivated by our lens of inner dialogue and what we do for a living and how we go through each day as a friend and as a neighbor and as a colleague. But when you go through a breakup, you have this unique period of time where you get to see not only the flaws of the person that you chose to be with during that time, but your own flaws that led you to that decision.
mm,
And if you can follow that trail, and I highly recommend doing so with a therapist or guidance in that way, you can start to see places where you need to work on you.
right.
And how cool is that? You know, normally, like our conscious is not able to access these subconscious places on a regular basis because we're so busy living through our coping mechanisms and ways we've learned to survive all
Right.
of these things that we carry. And, you know, it's funny. So after I broke up with this person, I started to realize that maybe it was a pride thing. And I wanted to be right that this person could change. And I wanted to know that I was capable enough to help them become healthier. And
Mhm.
each time we got into a fight, I would rationalize it to myself like, oh, I'll just accept it now and say I'm sorry. So then we can get to the good place where I can start explaining, like, and help it. And I'm like, wow, how conceited was that? You know, thinking that I could change this person or make them see the error of their ways or that they're not a very nice person, that they're actually quite abusive. And it was that arrogance and pride in the relationship that kept me there, that
Right.
kept me choosing it, even though it was very bad for me. It effectively ruined many parts of my life that I let fall apart because I chose to stay, right?
Mm,
And I think that that language is very important. Choosing to stay, taking accountability for yourself, because then you can look at it like, wow, now I know what matters to me.
mm,
The things that fell apart, I've spent time rebuilding, finding again, finding myself and finding relationships that matter, things that matter in my life that I now know are sacred to me as a person because I didn't like
right.
who I was then. So that insight let me get at what I actually care about and what I need, right? So taking a step back from there, and hopefully this is kind of what you were talking about before. It's looking at yourself from a lens where you say, I chose to stay, which means I get to choose the next person too.
Mm,
You know, I get to choose who I am, what I want to be, and what I want to see in my next relationship. And I think that's really cool because for me, my criteria became sexy best friend.
right, right.
And
I
you're
like that,
welcome. Oh,
yeah.
amazing. And I love it. And you're welcome to take it with you when you go. So, sexy best friend to me became I want openness and transparency,
Mm,
like I would with a best friend. You know, when you talk to a friend and you're like, oh my God, I did such a dumb thing at the store today. They told me to like have a good afternoon or something. And I was like, you know, I fumbled my words and I walked away and they probably think I'm so dumb. You know, when you talk to your best friend about these silly moments in your life
oh,
or your
yeah.
insecurities, or you're like, oh, I did a good thing today. Like I was brave and I accomplished some weird fear that only your best friend knows. That's what I wanted in a partner.
Right.
And on top of that, I wanted them to be sexy. So I wanted someone that I could have a healthy, open dialogue with in a sexual way, where
Right.
it's a part of our relationship in and outside the act itself. So I wanted someone who's going to be pinching my bum through the day, or, you know, I want to be able to like send them a few pictures when I'm just like feeling cute. Here you go. And I wanted it to be a part of that dynamic.
Right.
I never wanted sex to be used as a tool of oppression
Mm,
or a way to like kind of support arguments or things like that. I wanted it to be a core part of what we had that was special, right? So that's where like the sexy best friend comes in.
right.
Openness, mutual emotional support, not where it falls on one person or the other, and then that physical connection together. And so I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of studies on this, that it takes actual work. Now, saying work automatically makes people upset. It's like this like knee-jerk reaction where we're just like, oh,
Right.
work. Because it has such a negative context in our society and our culture. It's like, oh, something I have to do. And it's like, well, sweetie, it's something you want to do.
Right.
You want to be here. You choose this. So it's almost like a chosen daily action where it's like maintaining emotional intimacy over time takes you both showing up and being vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, it takes saying things that you're like, they're not going to like this, but I need to say it, you know, and it
Right.
takes stepping forward and being honest with yourself at the end of every single day. Because as we learned through the breakup portion, if you're not honest with yourself and if you don't take a good hard look at who you are and your decisions, you can't be honest with anybody else. You can't make decisions that actually support your goals. In fact, if you're being dishonest with yourself, you'll actively make decisions that go against what you say you need or you say you want, and then end up in a position where you're like, oh no, why do I keep choosing bad people? And it's because of that dishonesty at the end of the day. Then also, sorry, last note
No, it's
is is the
okay.
sexual maintenance.
Right.
And maybe this is a whole discussion on its own, but keeping sexual chemistry alive is absolutely possible.
Mm.
And it's possible to do with the same person. But again, at the end of every day, it requires honesty, openness, and a willingness to grow with a person, not away from them. I've been reading a lot of studies. There's a whole bunch of information out there on something called mate poaching. And as you know, I'm writing a book, so I'm looking at
Right.
digital influence and culture on ourselves and our relationships. So it talks a lot about how when people are unhappy in their relationship for emotional intimacy or trust related issues, oftentimes you'll find that this is when porn problems start to pop up,
Uh-huh.
or flirtations with a certain somebody at work or a friend, or DMing starts to happen where boundaries start to get crossed. And it oftentimes will show up in the way of, oh, this person's now watching porn, so they're touching their partner less, and then it just becomes cyclic. And they're like, well, my partner never wants to have sex with me, so I'm just going to watch porn. And then it starts to become this vicious cycle when, if you look at the root of the problem as opposed to the symptoms, you start to realize that it all kind of comes back to that friendship and that intimacy and honesty with each other, where it's like, maybe if you start to have more sit downs and check-ins, then you'll be able to actually avoid those conversations.
Right.
If you're secretly a kinky person and you want your partner to tie you up to the bedpost and you don't tell your partner, there's a good reason why you're not getting what you need in that department, right? And you can't blame your partner for not tying you up when you don't tell them that that's what you want, right?
Wow. I'm stunned. That was so good. I, you know, I think and it's funny because I always heard, well, I should say I always heard, but lately I've been hearing about porn. And I wanted to go back to that for a second.
Yeah, of course.
Because I started hearing more about that. I started reading about it. I started even listening to other podcasts about it, that how porn now is coming into play because, you know, of any type of fantasy that the man might have, or maybe the sex is gone out of the relationship. Now it's like they don't touch each other, you know, they don't even kiss anymore. So now the man is watching more and more porn.
Maybe the woman too.
Yeah, but I'm going from a man's point of view. You know,
I'm just putting it out there. It happens.
No, and I appreciate that. You know, so going forward now, you know, you have a relationship that you fight and you get back together. You fight, you get back together, and it keeps on going and going. But you know, one of the partners says, "Hey, the sex is good. I don't want to leave."
Right.
You know. Is there any type of empowerment after that breakup? If there is a breakup after maybe 6-7 times that they broke up, you know, and one of the partners might be a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
So, the other partner notices that.
Yeah.
How is that? How is one of the partners, let's say that is not a narcissist, how do they move forward? If my
Right.
question made any sense at all.
I think there's a few different things going on here. So I'm just going to break it apart really quick and you can
Sure.
tell me if I understood you right. So, say there's an unhealthy relationship where they obviously have a bad dynamic together, emotionally, personality wise, maybe they don't mesh, but the sex is really good. So they keep saying that they'll come back together for one way or another. One person promises change, the other person promises that they'll be more lenient or they'll change too. And they want to keep getting together for the sexy things, but
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head.
So, okay, good. At the end of the day, I think both people need to ask themselves what they're looking for in intimate relationships. Because
Mm.
if you want a sexy best friend, this is not your person. You got to get real with that because I can tell you, for example, I've had sex friends before, people in my
Okay.
life who our entire relationship was exactly physical.
So it would have
This
been,
person,
so it would be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
yeah,
Katie.
no, no, you're good.
Would it be like friends with benefits then? Would that
Nope,
be, oh, so it's not
not even.
categorized. Oh, okay.
Literally human beings in my phone that would text me and be like, "You free?" And I'm like, "Yeah, cool." We'd spend half an hour, bang it out, do some cool stuff together, and then say, "Okay, thank you. See you next time. Bye." That's it.
Right. Ah, okay.
Entire relationship, just sex. And they knew what it was. I knew what it was because this actually, funny enough, after I dated that awful person, I got to a great place with myself where I was like, okay, so while I'm single, while I'm looking for my sexy best friend, I don't want to be in a bad relationship again. I don't want to be
Man.
committed to somebody who's not my person. That's not
Wow.
fair to me or to anybody else. So I decided, well, once I realized what I wanted from a single relationship, that I would be in a place where I was single with sex friends.
Right.
And that worked for me. And it worked well for the other people too. And I can tell you that the men were very excited about that prospect because I would get the, oh my God, you're a woman who just wants to use me for my dick. Fantastic. And I'm like, yeah, it works for me. Like,
Right.
and I didn't need that emotional connection because they weren't the person I wanted it with. I knew that it would be a
Ah,
futile effort, right? So
gotcha.
if you keep asking a wall to be a door, you're never going to get the result you're looking for. So stop asking for something impossible and start to create functional relationships that are honest with what you need. Because I
Mm.
guarantee there's some other human beings in this world who are like, while I wait for my person or while I wait for myself to get to a place that I'm ready for a person,
Yeah.
I want to bang it out with somebody in a consensual and respectful way.
Right.
And you can look for that. You can define those things for yourself. You are not bound to the structure of traditional monogamy. It's not 1940. You're good. Go find what
Yeah.
you need. Just
Right.
be honest about it and take that time to sit with yourself, because I would never have been able to be okay with those relationships
Right.
if I didn't know that it was because I was saving that actual space for a primary relationship for somebody who fit my full criteria. And I
Right.
wasn't going to settle for anything else. So I found things that made it work for me in different ways. And I may not have had any romance per se in that time, but I had a lot of great time with my friends. I'd get dolled out, we'd go out dancing, have a great night away. I'd come home and if I was feeling frisky, I'd text a sex friend and be like, hey, you know, I
Right.
invite you to find something that works for you too. So you can be flexible. That's my answer to the bad dynamic with the good sex is quite personally, my advice, stay away from bad dynamics. They do
Mm.
not bring out the best in you, and you cannot complain when you keep being that bad person. But if you want to just have sex with somebody, just tell them, be honest, and then
Right.
do it in a way that works for you both.
Mm. It's funny because I I was talking to somebody about this a while ago. He was on my show, and he had like one or two girlfriends that he
Mhm.
hung out with, and it was just basically sex,
Nice.
and that was it. And they still remain friends and all that. Because I wanted to go back. Why is there no such thing in your opinion,
Mhm.
sex without benefits or sex with benefits? I should say.
Ooh.
What? Because you said no, it was just sex. Like in other
Mhm.
words, there was no connection in terms of just talking to each other, being friends, and it was just
Mhm.
basically just a sexual thing. And okay, see you another
Mhm.
time. Is
Yeah,
that because I wanted to
yeah.
find out about that because I known a couple of my friends that had sexual relations with women, but they still remain friends. They still will hang out
Right.
once in a while, but then they wouldn't see each other for a couple of weeks, and then he will
Mhm.
call or she will call, and then they will get together. So I always thought that was
Right.
sex with benefits. That's what I thought.
So that's a really interesting question. I like it. And I've seen it go many different ways. I mean,
Ah, okay.
anyone who's had friends who've talked about these types of relationships knows what a tricky little minefield they can be. Now, I can tell you that the sex friends I've had in the past, good people, probably could have been friends.
Right,
You
right.
know, we liked the same video games, we had conversations about sports, about life, about, power dynamics. And we obviously had sexual chemistry.
Right.
But I had been in positions before where it almost always is the case that boundaries start to get pushed.
Mm,
And people go in with the best of intentions. I really believe it's true. But at the end of the day, you're filling a hole in your heart with the wrong shape.
mm.
And there's this love hormone that happens when you have sex a lot with the same person. It's called oxytocin, and it starts to bond you
Mm.
to somebody. It's actually when women give birth, they're overfilled with this huge surge of oxytocin, and it's that love feeling where you start to feel overwhelmingly physically drawn to a person. And that aside, just remember that as we go through this conversation.
Sure.
I personally never wanted to ruin what I had with the potential of inviting emotional intimacy and bonding
Right.
into that sexual dynamic, because it's already an intimate act. No matter how down and dirty you want to get, it is intimate. You're bringing your bodies together in a certain way that's vulnerable, and you're putting yourself in that position. So already you got that space going on where there could be that opening, and I wanted to minimize the amount of damage that could occur. So some people do the friendship thing, but there almost always is somebody who's a little bit more into
Mm.
that bonding than the other person. And I mean, let's be honest, it's nice to be around someone who tells you you're good looking and who laughs at your jokes and who wants to spend time with you and who you could strip down if you wanted to, but you can take it or leave it. That may feel really nice for your self-esteem.
Right.
But I didn't want to use somebody like that. That's
Mm.
not fair. And in a lot of ways, it felt like leading people on. And when I looked at myself and I looked at those dynamics. And even in the past, a younger version of myself, I may have been a little too flirty with some friends I knew thought I was attractive. And that wasn't right of me. And
Right.
so when I came to face myself, I realized that I didn't want to use somebody, I didn't want to hurt somebody. I didn't need that boost to my self esteem at the cost of someone else's. That's what it is at the end of the day. So that's why I built those boundaries around
Right.
those sexual relationships. And if you want to have lunch with a friend, call a friend, go for lunch,
Right.
but
Gotcha.
I wanted those clear lines. So that's what worked for me.
Okay, no, no, you got to set boundaries and everything. I definitely get
Mhm.
that. So anyway, first of all, Kate, I want to thank you so much for being on People on Dating. You've been one of my favorite guests, and I know I'm going to have you back on again.
You're the best.
Anything you want to promote? Anything you want to talk about your programs or anything about your website? Please feel free.
Oh, thanks. Well, first of all, I am excited to see you again soon. I always love our chats.
Yes,
Uh, you
definitely. Me too.
Uh, you can find me online at cognitivekate.com. And I can tell you, I am still writing that book.
I'm
Hopefully
waiting for
one day I
that.
will
I'm waiting
finish.
for that.
You and me both, my friend. I'll be talking about online life, balancing what it means to go through a half physical world, half online world, what that means for our thinking, and what that means for our relationships.
Yeah.
So, very excited to get this out there. Oh, and of course, I'm writing it in a way that isn't just for academic people because I don't believe in that. I want it
Yeah.
to be accessible because, and I say accessible in that I want it to be just spoken language. And that's the way I'm writing it, not jargon specific, you know. So, very excited to share that with you once it's done. So,
Yeah.
thank
No,
you
I
so
can't
much
wait.
for having me, Will. It's been so
Well,
great to chat.
I always love talking to you. And Kate, again, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. Much, much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me. Until next time, my friend.
Definitely. Bye bye. Well, everyone, that was Kate Dudzik, and you can find her at cognitivekate.com. That's cognitivekate.com. Kate, again, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. Much appreciated. You can find me on peopleondating.com. That's peopleondating.com. Check out our past shows and check out our blog. Also, when you get a chance, please go to our YouTube channel, People on Dating. Look for us there. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share it. Also, you can find me on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Anyway, guys, on behalf of People on Dating, I'm Will Morales. Until next time, thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And remember, it's just a conversation, no judgment. Bye.